President Buhari says federal government will no longer tolerate inflammatory comments and order unguarded utterances by Nigerians.
More Nigerians react to President Buhari's return from medical vacation.
After 3.5 years of vacuum, China gets new Nigerian ambassador.
And today on Good Morning Nigeria, our focus is on the prevalence of hate speech, which threatens the peace and corporate existence of Nigeria.
All Nigerians of good conscience have continued to express grave concern over the dominance of ethnic inflammatory speech, most pervasive in the country today.
Quite rightly so, Blessing. Now, hate speech in Nigeria is, of course, demonstrated or evident in hot or several exchanges you find or hear on the streets, online forum, as well as, of course, in sectarian print media in different parts of the country.
Now, the public space, the dangerous effect is widening. And I agree with you, Kingsley, that just if you read comments that follow most articles online, whether in the newspaper, blogs, or the numerous online news copies, as well as other areas that you have mentioned, you will marvel at the capacity of educated or semi-literate Nigerians for hate speeches. Well, hate speech speeches is also so pervasive in Nigeria now, to the extent that it is doubtful if there is one Nigeria that is completely free from the vice.
Now, as you indicated, the public space that's both online and offline has been literally hijacked by a vocal minority of individuals who promote ethnocentric ideas inimical to the peace and well-being of a majority of other citizens. Now,
the dangerous effect is widening on the social media and the social distance amongst the different ethnic groups in the country as it is today. It is harder to build a united Nigeria now than it was at independence, to seem as if it's polarized the nation.
Absolutely. Now, this is because hate speech employs discriminatory epithets to insult and stigmatize others on the basis of their ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or other forms of group membership. Now, hate speech also generates anger and bad blood, and oftentimes violence. But let's get it wrong. Nigerians have a right to freely express their opinions, and this right, of course, is enshrined in Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. However, this fundamental right of freedom of speech is also, as some persons have indicated, misused or otherwise outrightly abused to disseminate hate speech, which goes contrary to the fundamental right itself and the spirit of the Constitution.
You're right, Kingsley. Nigeria, of course, is a nation of diverse and diversity in all its interests, complexities, with over 180 million inhabitants and also about 250 ethnic groups. Nigeria's multi-ethnic orientation, cultural practices, religious beliefs, as well as its language have over the years been major sources of strength. And the current manifestation is certainly giving us another outlook, well, dividing the country into pockets of religious as well as ethnic cleavages. Now, this is threatening the basic foundation of the country's existence.
All right, now worried by the ugly situation, then acting president, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo announced that the intimidation of a population by words or speech is a kindred of terrorism and would no longer be tolerated by the government.
Now, what is hate speech and how does it manifest? Who are some of these perpetrators or most of these perpetrators, and what do you think could be their motives? And where does one cross the line in the exercise of one's fundamental human right to free speech or just expressing oneself? These are some of the questions, as well as some of those ones on your mind, that we attempt to provide answers to on the second part of our program today. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, but our main topic of the day is what you just listened to, the transmission of a nationwide broadcast by President Muhammadu Buhari, who returned to the country on Saturday evening. He came in from London in the UK, where he had been for medical vacation since the 7th of May.
Now, in the broadcast, the president thanked all Nigerians and the international community for the outpouring of love and affection for him and the administration. Of course, you didn't forget your prayers as well.
Absolutely, and it's significant that the president, of course, has spoken to Nigerians at last. There were all kinds of insinuations that the president had lost his speech and so on and so forth, that he had not spoken to Nigerians since 11.
Exactly.
We've had the benefit of that 6-minute or so broadcast a while ago on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, as well as, of course, the networks of other stations. We believe that, you know, that radio and television stations also at the president's broadcast. Let me welcome you on that note to Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA, we're Africa's biggest. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And my name is Blessing. I join Kingsley to welcome you to today's edition of the program. In the course of this edition, we'll get to bring to you our companion segments, which include the newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, as well as entertainment news. Let's kick off with the main news, and here's Anne Jibun our guide. Good morning to you, Anne.
Good morning, Blessing. Kingsley, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the day's news. President Muhammadu Buhari has warned that the federal government will no longer tolerate inflammatory comments and other unguarded utterances by Nigerians that tend to undermine the corporate existence of the country. In a special broadcast to the nation on his return from his medical vacation in London, the president maintained that Nigeria's unity is not negotiable.
Nigerian unity is settled and not negotiable. We shall not allow irresponsible elements to start trouble, and when things get bad, they run away and settle others with the responsibility of bringing back order, if necessary, with their blood.
He charged security agencies not to let the successes achieved in the renewed onslaught against terrorism and insurgency be a reason to relax, adding that terrorists and criminals must be fought and destroyed relentlessly. Coalition of civil societies in Katsina State has staged a rally in solidarity with President Muhammadu Buhari, as well as offered prayers for Allah to grant him wisdom, strength and good health to discharge his mandate effectively. That the coalition also threw light its weight behind the president's anti-corruption crusade.
To continue to pray for the success of this administration. The success is people's success.
Well, as the return of President Muhammadu Buhari to the country after a medical vacation in London continues to generate reactions across the states, some state governors have also reacted to the cheering news. And the Senate Joint Committee on Customs, Excise and Tariff and Marine Transport has found some companies that appeared before it culpable and has directed the Nigerian Customs Service to ensure the return of monies given to these companies to the federal government.
In the same vein, those companies found to have been involved in round-tripping, abuse of Form M, and a violation of foreign exchange guidelines by central bank will be charged to court. The committee has also resolved that companies that fail to appear before it, despite the window of opportunity given to them, if they don't appear before Monday next week, they will be made to face the full wrath of the law.
After 3.5 years of vacuum, the seat of the Nigerian ambassador to China has finally been occupied in Beijing. The new ambassador, Baba Ahmed Jidda, was received at the airport by the officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. The group of African ambassadors resident in China and some officials of the embassy, officials of the Nigerian embassy in China also. Ambassador Baba Ahmed Jidda presented copies of his letter of credence to the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the 15th of August 2017. Well, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and IDPs has resolved to renew intervention progressively to cater for humanitarian needs in all aspects of its challenges. Heads of the two agencies disclosed this at the occasion of the commemoration of the 2017 World Humanitarian Day celebration in Abuja, which has as its theme, not a target protection for civilians.
NEMA, being the coordinating agency of all humanitarian activities, is committed to providing the needed leadership and is doing well so far.
We must all therefore join hands and find durable solutions to the myriad societal challenges that have gripped our great nation.
And we at the legislative arm of government will continue to respond by supporting the executive arm as well as all humanitarian partners in making sure that we combat these acts of terror.
Well, that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll be back after this break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The movie I'm downloading is on 95%. It's still on. Eh?
Introducing Airtel Unlimited Data Plans. Get Unlimited 10 for 10,000 naira. Get Unlimited 15 for 15,000 naira. And Unlimited 20 for 20,000 naira. Unlimited data. Unlimited you.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Hey, great news! Oral-B has just been voted Kudos #1 quality toothpaste of 2017 by you. So even though times are hard, as a mother, you know that Oral-B is good for your family's oral health because they deserve the best. It's great value because it protects you against tooth holes and gum problems that can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your family's teeth and gives them all-round protection. So remember, protect their future. Oral-B for healthier and stronger teeth in 1 week.
right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. Now it's time for us to take a look at business stories. Now, the banking sector records over 300 million volume of transactions in the second quarter of 2017, but active voice subscribers dropped by nearly 7% during the same period. This is according to the latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics. We'll now join our correspondent Joy Uzo for details of this and others.
Hello and welcome to Business News. Recent data on electronic payment channels in the banking sector revealed that ATM transactions dominated the volume of deals, recording about 187.8 million volumes, valued at 1.54 trillion naira. This formed part of records in the second quarter of 2017. In terms of credit to private sector, a total of 15.71 trillion naira worth of credit was allocated by the banks in quarter under review. Oil and gas as well as manufacturing sectors got credit allocations of 3.53 trillion naira and 2.22 trillion naira to record the highest credit allocation in the quarter. However, the number of bank staff decreased from 77,690 in the first quarter of 2017 to 75,607 in the second quarter. Meanwhile, telecoms data for quarter 2 2017 also reflected that approximately 143.6 million subscribers were active on voice, as against more than 153 million in the quarter of 2016, which represented 6.67% drop in subscribers base. Similarly, a total of 92,136,023 subscribers were active on internet, as against 93,776,711 in the third quarter of 2016, which represented 1.75% drop in subscribers base. Lagos State has the highest number of subscribers in terms of active voice per state in quarter 2 2017, and it is closely followed by Ogun and Oyo states, while Bayelsa and Ebonyi states have the least number of subscribers. Similarly, Lagos State has the highest number of subscribers in terms of active internet per state in quarter 2 2017, and closely followed by Ogun and Oyo states, while Bayelsa and Ebonyi states have the least number of subscribers. In terms of subscribers by technology, GSM has the highest number of active voice. CDMA and fixed wired followed closely, while fixed wireless has the least number of subscribers by technology. In another development, the Industrial Training Fund is pushing for a legislation that will allow for alternative source of funding for the Students' Industrial Work Experience Scheme, CWES, in Nigeria. Stakeholders at a recent meeting agreed to push for the alternative funding so as to ensure the success of the scheme. DG of the Industrial Training Fund, Joseph Harry, said revenue-generating agencies like Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, and other agencies should set aside part of their revenue to fund the Students' Industrial Program in Nigeria, adding that the initiative will be followed up with the National Assembly to bring about its implementation. Students' Industrial Work Experience Scheme, CWES, is one of the Industrial Training Fund programs. It was designed to give Nigerian students studying occupationally related courses in higher institutions the experience that would supplement their theoretical learning. Finally, a quick check on how the equities market fared last Friday on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And that's it on Business News. I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo. Up next is our newspaper review segment.
All right, Bayo Toby, our newspaper reviewer, is right here with us for today's edition of the program. Bayo, Good morning and welcome. I hope you had a nice weekend.
Yes, I had. Thank you very much, Kinsley. Good morning.
Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, that's right. Of course, the lead story that we have on the front pages of all the papers today, except one of them, but at least on the front pages of 4 of the papers, I believe, the lead stories drawn from the broadcast of the president to Nigerians upon his return from London the weekend from medical vacation. It's captioned this way by the New Telegraph. The New Telegraph has as its lead with a double-decker headline. Buhari, that's the kicker, I was distressed by divisive comments, and vows to destroy terrorists and criminal elements, insists Nigeria's unity not negotiable, and President warns Arewa youths, IPOB and MASOB. Details of the story can be found on pages 2 and 4. Now, for the Daily Trust, it's also the lead story, and it opens with a kicker. Nigeria's unity settled, and has a writer, I'm glad to be back. Of course, there are other stories on the front page there. As I indicated, Blessing, you also have that with you in terms of the lead stories of the other papers.
Yes, I have. For the leadership, is coming in this caption. In nationwide broadcast, we shall not allow irresponsible elements to start trouble. This comes from President Muhammadu Buhari with 2 riders. Says all Nigerians are free to live anywhere in the country, and also terrorists, criminals will be fought relentlessly. And you have the photograph right there of the president with his children and grandchildren at the presidential villa at the weekend. Aso Villa celebrates Buhari's return. President's healing divine. This is come from Christian Association of Nigeria. And there is another writer. It's prayers answered. This is coming from governors Jimobi of Oyo State and Masari of Katsina State. Story starts right up, continues on page 6. And quickly to the Nigerian Tribune, still on the president, we have leading for the Nigerian Tribune this morning. We shall tackle security lapses, Buhari assures as he resumes duty. You'll find the details on pages 4, 10, and 11. But with a photograph of the president there, you have some writers listed. Says comment on social media during his absence taken too far. Nigeria's unity, non-negotiable, he adds. More jubilation in Abuja, Maiduguri, Bauchi, Katsina over his return. Meanwhile, Kogi declares holiday for Thanksgiving.
All right, Bayo?
Yes, Blessing. The photograph on the front page of, I think, the leadership, featuring the president sitting among his children and grandchildren, actually says it all. And he summed it up by saying, I'm glad to be back home among my brothers and sisters. The president in this broadcast, which you had earlier on, said that I'm grateful to God and also thank Nigerians for their prayers. And he says, I'm pleased to be back home soil among my brothers and sisters. However, he expressed his consternation with comments that sent to pitch the nation on the divide. And he said this is a step too far, and he declared every Nigerian has a right to live anywhere in the country, and Nigeria's unity is not negotiable, it's settled. He did a reminiscence and said in 2003, late Dim Chukwuemeka Odumegwu was his guest for 2 days in 2003, and they discussed late into the night, and they came to a conclusion that the country must remain one and united. And the commander-in-chief gave directives to the security agencies. He says terrorism and criminals must be destroyed to give way to peace. He says there will be a reinvigorating fight against Boko Haram, kidnapping, farmers and herders clashes, and ethnic violence fueled by political mischief makers. He specifically said we shall not allow irresponsible elements to start trouble, and when things get bad, they will run away. So we will all be here and salvage the nation together.
All right, Bayo, thanks. Let's return to other headlines now. Blueprint newspaper is next for us. Blueprint from top to bottom, straight away. 9 confirmed dead in Lagos boat mishap. That's on page 5 in greater detail. And Mietiala dares Middlebelt youth on quit notice. And flood sacks 100 families in Yobe. And Kano Markets Fire appeal fund nets 2 billion naira. That's on page 7. NJC to UNODC, that's your report unfounded and subjective. NJC stands for the National Judicial Council, and the UN Office on Drug and I'm not sure what, and on drug and other crimes. Corruption, I believe, yes, corruption. Yes, your report unfounded and subject. That's what said that there's some 400 billion naira paid annually as bribes. Details of that story can be found on page 5. Now, the lead story says ASU's demands unrealistic. That's according to Ezekwesili. That's on page 6. He's former Minister of Education. And then at the foot of the front page of Blueprint, said no alternative to Buhari now. That's according to NUPENG. That's the Union of Petroleum Workers. We expect positive things. That's TUC, Trade Union Congress, and Kogi declares public holiday. And lastly, the APC's sudden interest in restructuring deceitful. That's according to the PDP on page 13. Listen.
All right, to some other stories on the front page of the leadership. Just below the nameplate, you have the story, Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria blames delay in airport certification on paucity of funds. And just insert there, you have a story that you find on page 12. Gunmen kill Governor Autumn's economic advisor. That is a story found on page 12. Quickly now to the Nigerian Tribune. Just below the name plate, you have stories on the federal government sharing of what the state as well as the federal government shared in 6 months. You have 36 states shared 2.78 trillion naira in 6 months. This is according to a report. You find a report on page 37. Akwa Ibom, Lagos, 8 others topped list, and Gombe, 5 others got lowest allocation. Now, to the right side of the paper, you have the story from Kogi State. Confusion over status of strange disease in Kogi. It's gastroenteritis and malaria. This is coming from the state government. But then the federal government agency says we are still conducting tests. All the details you find on page 4. Yes, we're taking that of the story on the president tackling security lapses, but at the foot of the page is the story, which is trending on page 4 anyway. Yoruba leaders to hold grand rally on restructuring September 7. To some other stories, sperm cells created in lab offer hope for infertility. Gunmen kill Benue governor's aide and shoot wife. And late Taraba governor's brother dies hours after his burial. Right.
All right, just before we take other headlines, earlier I was grappling with the full meaning of UNODC. That's from Blueprint. Just below the nameplate again, to return to that story, NJC to UNODC. Your report on founded and subjective National Judicial Council, that's what the NJC stands for. And then UNODC stands for the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, not Corruption, as I indicated earlier. That story is in greater detail on page 5. Let's take a look at the front page very quickly of Daily Trust. Daily Trust... 3 headlines were taken from the front page. That's on the right side column. Federal government okays special courts for hate speech and kidnapping. That's on page 3. And explosion kills 2 and injures 3 in Yobe. And then, of course, what the federal government has shared. Blessing and bio. Lastly, from New Telegraph. Of course, you've already read the story about the killing of the governor's aide. Exactly. That's at the foot of the front page of New Telegraph. It says gunmen kill governor's aide, shoot wife, and police confirm assassination. Autumn arrest killers now. And lastly, there it says antibiotics reduce body's immune response. That's on page 5. And of course, there are other stories on the front page there. Bio.
Yes. Well, there were some reactions about the return of the president over the weekend. Governor Abubakar Sani Bello of Niger said that the arrival has dealt a dirty blow to mischief makers, death wishers, and those who were calling for his reelection. He also had words of praise for the acting president, who he said his loyalty and patriotism and competence for holding forth while the president was away is unquestionable. Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State joined in welcoming the president. I hear him. It is unnecessary to play politics with the president's help. Governor Yahya Bello of Kogi State has declared today as public holiday. He says this is the president's recovery is symbolic in the sense that it is concomitant with the recovering of the nation from his economic woe. The Nigerian Medical Association has also reacted. They welcomed the president back from his medical vacation, and the president of the Nigerian Medical Association, Dr. Mike Ogirima, says that the president should replicate in Nigeria the facilities he benefited from in London within the next 2 years. He says specifically he should utilize this positive experience to impact on Nigeria to take care of the well-being of the masses. And he said succinctly, equip, and upgrade.
All right, Bayo, that's the most that we can take. Thanks a lot. The last point about the admonition blessing that the president should replicate within the next 2 years the kind of facilities that he enjoyed. That's fine. It's good to say that. But the responsibility is not that of the federal government alone. Nothing stops state governments from having world-class hospitals. Nothing stops private individuals from establishing world-class hospitals. Nothing stops charitable organizations from having world-class hospitals.
We have great philanthropists.
Philanthropists all over the place, and you have various institutions.
I'm surprised when recently I saw a documentary on health facilities in Yobe, another one on Bayelsa State. The latest health facilities are available there. But come back to us, our maintenance culture. Some years back, there was this policy of establishing special centers for ailments, cancer centers for liver, for kidney, special parts of the country. What has become of that? There's a national cancer
$1
center.
million question,
on the way to the airport. That's right. All right, Bayo, these are issues to look at, but it's not a single person responsibility, as you just indicated. Thank you for being here today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow is another day.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we're having guests to discuss the president's broadcast to the nation at 7 o'clock. And then we're looking at hate speech and the danger that it portends, as well as efforts being made now to rein in the purveyors of hate speech. We'll take a break now.
I don't cover my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you going to yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment. And it cause our people serious harm. Militants is there. You know good. Me, I not do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Get high on books, not drugs. Only those who hate themselves fill their bodies with smoke, drugs, and harmful substances.
He broke my heart.
These days, when young lady or young man has emotional upheavals, he or she abuses cough syrup with codeine, some sniff glue, sewage, even petrol.
I'm already finished. Just let me finish myself completely.
Alas, where is our tomorrow headed? This week on Professor John Bull, we introduce to you high people, all of them, one by one. Find out why Jumoke wasted her school fees and why Flash went local.
Come on, stay on face, liar.
Over and out. Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the NTA. Just about 40 minutes ago, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Muhammadu Buhari, who returned to the country on Saturday evening from a medical vacation in the UK, where he had been since the 7th of May, addressed the nation, and it was a nationwide broadcast on several networks. And that story is also the lead in a number of the papers that we have reviewed in our newspaper segment. But there are issues, of course, that Mr. President touched on in his broadcast. We have two guests with us in the studios to discuss the content of that broadcast, as well as matters, of course, arising from all of that, before we then proceed to our next topic, which has to do with hate speech. But in the meantime, let's welcome our two guests here with us. First, we'd like to welcome the Dean of the Faculty of Communication at Bayero University, Kano. That's Professor Umar Pate. Professor Umar Pate, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kingsley, and good morning, Nigeria.
All right. So we also have with us Dr. Jideofor Adibe, an Associate Professor of Political Science at Nasarawa State University. Dr. Adibe, a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Straight away, Professor Pate, what's your take on the present broadcast? Around about 6 minutes?
Yes. First of all, we congratulate the President on his successful return to the country, and from all indications, he's looking quite healthy and ready to face the challenges of heading Nigeria. And from the speech, you can see that the man is seriously at paying on issues that have been emerging in the country in the few months, or do we say in the, about a year now? People have been agitating on so many things, bringing out their frustrations, to the extent that they are even talking about separating Nigeria. I think that perhaps in the past people were thinking Nigeria's unity is non-negotiable. We have fought a civil war. We have settled on so many issues. And all these contentions, I think that can be worked out. We can settle them either in the National Assembly or on different platforms that are available. But it appears that the structures are failing to the extent that the frustrations have reached the point of people now thinking of, do we even need to stay in Nigeria? And you could see that the arguments have been ongoing, gradually picking up, and people that perhaps you could expect may not even contribute to the debate are increasingly taking sides. And this is also very, very serious. So you could see that the president now is becoming very, very serious on it. And it means Nigeria also. The vice president was also on before the president came back, where he specifically talked about hate speech, which are also part of this. Like I've said on a different platform, you see, wars are not necessarily programmed, planned action, but they could be accidental. And what we are seeing today is Nigerians' minds are being increasingly prepared towards perhaps an accident happening.
Anyway, Professor Patty, thank you very much. Let's have a comment from Dr. DB. The president is back. There were clamors. He should speak to us. He should talk to us wherever he was in the United Kingdom. President is back.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, we now know that he's not on life support and that he's not brain dead, and that all the appearances in the UK were not being, he was not being propped up by any kind of stick or anything. So we are very glad he's back, and we hope that the force of his personality will inject some kind of stability into the polity. Having said that, I am also very happy that he tried to build some kind of consensus in his speech. Not many people will agree with him when he said that Nigerian unity is non-negotiable. Nigerian unity, like any unity, has always been negotiated and renegotiated. In fact, when you move from 3 regions to 19 states, that's negotiating peace. When you increase the revenue allocation formula, for example, the derivation principle from whatever it was, incrementally has gone up to 13%. That is also negotiating Nigerian unity. When the president himself considered that the groups have rights to aid their grievances, that also means if you are unhappy with the quality or the character of the unity, you can express it and people can renegotiate it. That's what people are talking about. In fact, the whole idea of constitutional amendment, constitution building, is also part of how to negotiate and renegotiate your unity. Even in marriage situations, when you tell your spouse, sit down, let's talk about all these grievances we have. How do we move forward? You are renegotiating your marriage. So I'm not too sure. I mean, but then that's maybe issue of semantics.
Yeah, so what then is the proper context? In which the president used the phrase,
no, Nigerian unity is not negotiable. I like the references, the coded innuendos he used to send some messages to groups like Nnamdi Kanu's group, to Arewa Youth. That was a very powerful message. My only concern, if the president has started the presidency the way the speech came out today, in terms of trying to build consensus, knowing that after an election, every election is like a war situation, that after an election, people now deliberately need to use state instruments to bring people together. And he said it when he won the election. Going forward, I'm going to draw a line, and this is how we proceed. But it seems somewhere along the line, the presidency, the government was hijacked by hardliners. And all we then started to hear was all this probe rhetoric. They saturated the space. And one of the consequences was the creation of groups like Avengers and others. Now we are happy he's back, and what we are looking for is for a new beginning.
All right, Dr. Adibe, thank you very much. One other point, Professor Patty, I would also like to address. The president ticked off the key security challenges that the country is facing. We are seeing the resurgence of Boko Haram in parts of the northeast. We've also seen the spike in kidnapping cases in different parts of the country, even though Abuja, Kaduna appears to have been addressed in recent weeks, but the issue is still there. And the president also talked about farmers-herdsmen clashes. These are things that have also caused quite some consternation among various groups in the country. What does this say, the president speaking to all of this now, to the various stakeholders in the country?
All these are issues that the government itself inherited. If you look at Nigeria, every section has a specialized type of conflict. You go to the southwest, it is area boys, armed robbery. You go to the northeast, terrorism. You go to the northwest, it's issue of religious fundamentalism. You go to the north central, ethnic issues. You go to Abuja, it's issue of corruption unlimited. Almost every section of the country has its own brand of problem. You go to the east, is issue of kidnappings. Now, the government itself must sit down and address these issues. They have been doing that quite all right. Whoever that is coming from the northeast like me will definitely commend the efforts of the government in addressing the issue of terrorism. But again, it seems we are relapsing. There are pockets of some of these issues over and there. It's not something you may expect to be settled in a day. But it is reasonable that every part of the structure must wake up. It is not just the federal government alone. When states take policies that produce some of these kind of reactions, when local governments are not functioning, you could definitely expect reactions at the lower level. The killing of the local government system, the taking away of their autonomy and the hijacking of their resources by the states certainly is a major factor in the resurgence of some of these conflicts that we see all over the land. Because people at the lower level who look up to the local government have nothing doing. So what do you expect? They start hating themselves, they start fighting, they start going into crimes. So I hope the government will not only insist on addressing the issue from the security, military or the police action alone. There must be also a social engineering kind of process where the local governments could be functional. The state themselves must be sensitive to the kind of policies that they come up with. That again will help and boost the efforts of the federal government. But simply ordering soldiers to go to the field for them to go on responding to the issues will not address the matters. Go to the northeast, for example. I could tell you without any fear of doubt that one of the major causes of the Boko Haram conflict is the killing of the local governments and the bastardization of the entire system of governance in several parts of the northeast sub-region. So we have to also address that and then see how people could be economically active and also become useful to themselves so that they won't have to think of crime as an alternative source of revenue.
All right, Professor Pate, thank you very much. Dr. Adibe, once again, what the President talked about his encounter with the late Emeka Ojukwu, Chief Emeka Ojukwu in 2003, where he was his guest for a couple of days. They discussed, a number of issues, ultimately agreed that, Nigeria's unity is paramount. What is embedded in such a message in the broadcast?
I think that was a very, very powerful, allegory. I think it was, it sent that message that, look, we are not enemies. Even the person that was the Ojukwu himself, I related with him well. For me to have harbored him for 2 days means we have moved on. And that's a very, very clear and powerful unifying message. And having said this, one of the things we will expect the president to do as he settles down, there seems to be several centers of power. And if he can now begin to bring these centers of power to work together.
What do you mean?
Several independent centers. For example, let's give you an example of the EFCC and the MAGU and National Assembly. This seems to be an independent center. MAGU is supposed to be from the presidency. There was a report from DSS, negative report. National Assembly did its duty. And you can just, several of them, there seems to be several of such centers of power. If he can then, in coming back now and after settling down, be able to assert himself. It's not unusual to have centers of powers, but sometimes people like Obasanjo will allow them to compete among themselves and then you'll be able to take a decision, but you will never be in doubt who was in charge. That's one of the things now we expect to see, who is really in charge. Sometimes you hear Daura, and sometimes you hear this man is in charge.
But you always have kitchen cabinets everywhere. Kitchen cabinets. Everywhere around the world.
Kitchen cabinets, but no one will be in doubt, say, under Obasanjo, where the buck stops with. So that's one of the things we expect. And also, for us to prioritize this issue of nation building, to recognize that there are crises in nation building, to stop opening several centers of war centers at the center. So we need now to be able to see this is now the president who now able, because I actually sincerely believe that quite a number of the problems we are facing are a fallout from the few mistakes made by the president, by the government in the first 1 year in office. And if we can now say this is a new beginning. It's not unusual for governments in trying to settle down, you make mistakes in the early stages. But now let's see that this new coming, we are coming in with a new president who is asserting himself, who regards all parts of the country, irrespective of what he thinks of them,
Professor
as part of his constituency.
The last word.
Yes.
So in on that, leaders of thought, elders in the land must also come over this institution. How do we begin to address that?
Our system is such that the president is so powerful, the governors are extremely powerful, and luckily President Buhari has a lot of goodwill. And he should capitalize on the goodwill of the people, and particularly sympathy he has garnered right now to do things that are right and also address some of the social issues that Nigeria is confronting. We cannot continue going on like this. We cannot continue pretending and denying and issuing orders. We must also act, and act rightly and at the appropriate time before it becomes too late for Nigeria and the rest of us.
Professor Pate, thank you, and Dr. Adibe, thank you. But there's one point that I would like us to quickly address, and the question goes to either of you, but let's say Dr. Adibe. Look, we had a crisis of, the government had a crisis of expectations after it won the 2015 elections, because people expected Nigeria's problems to be solved, almost immediately. That's one of the crises of expectations the government faced. President Muhammadu Buhari, Nigerians are all happy that he's back, but he's recuperating. Anybody who has suffered a health crisis knows the way it is. Are we going to put some more pressure on him now to say, oh, listen, he's back, all the problems are going to be solved almost immediately, and yet he still has to, pick his foot, pick his foot and get his footing right before things settle down? What do we need to do so that we manage a crisis again, another potential crisis of expectations on the heels of the president's return?
Let me say that it comes down to the society is highly polarized. So even the whole notion of has he performed is subjectively determined. If you ask some people, for example, the CDD Buhari meter found out that 87% of people from the Northwest rated Buhari very high, whereas some zones rated him very low. So what we are going to say is that he can utilize the opportunity of the low bar of expectation from some zones. For example, see what happened when Maurice Iwu, after the low bar of expectation is set, it became very easy for Jagan to just, by doing something little, because the expectation is very low, the people, whatever you deliver now, people will rate it very high. Yes. This is exactly what Buhari should do now. The expectation in some areas are very low.
And the expectations are genuine expectations.
These expectations are low, but especially for him to be seen as a president for all. And if he begins a new beginning, just one or two small moves, people will begin to rate him very high.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Of course, that's the issue. Let's not put a lot of pressure on the president. He's still recovering, and we wish him the very best. Of course, we listened to his broadcast about an hour or so ago. So that does it for our first topic on the discussion segment on Good Morning Nigeria. Blessing.
Sure, Kingsley. Now to the second topic. We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll kickstart the second part to our discussion this morning. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. as a prompt for our conversation, which is the second part now. We'll take this background report. The various agitations that appear to characterize the political environment in Nigeria can be said to be born out of the hurtful and uncensored speech, or speeches, as you can have it. Omotola Mojola will tell us more.
Between the late 20th century and the 21st century, Africa had a number of civil unrest, some leading to crisis situations which portrayed the continent as vulnerable and did great dishonor to our image as one worthy of civility. In Rwanda, Congo, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Sudan, Northern and Southern Africa, the tales are gory. Most of the crisis situations could have been prevented, many of them defined as utterly unnecessary. While many are scarred by the images of war, others are yet to heal from the catastrophic loss of loved ones. Many more live as refugees of war across the world. Home feels so far away. While the aftermath leaves a sour taste, the brewer of the chaos perhaps never envisioned the level of physical, psychological and economic damage each did in their various polities. The genesis most times is spoken words, uttered with ill intentions and fanned by ethno-religious sentiments expressing some level of intolerance. While the trend of hate speech in the past, as subtle as they appeared in expression, had far-reaching consequences, the might of the social media has proven to incite faster, creating tension that could lead to disharmony. This trend has manifested in Nigeria in the last few years, used to propagate the selfish intentions of a few while heating up the polity to the detriment of the generality. This has led to varying development that questions the unity and stability of the country. And to this end, the federal government condemned in strong terms the trend of hate speech and threatens to sanction any person or group of persons peddling hate speech.
Intimidation of a population by words, by speech, is an act of terrorism. And this government intends to take this matter seriously.
How much can hate speech do, and how does it affect our collective interest as a people? Join us on Good Morning Nigeria as guests discuss further.
All right, thank you very much, Omotola Mojola, for that background report. Now we have guests with us in the studios. We are returning our two guests who earlier discussed the broadcast by President Muhammadu Buhari about an hour or so ago. First again, we'd like to welcome once again to this second topic, Professor Umar Pate, Dean, School of Faculty of Communication by University of Kano. Professor Pate, welcome to the second topic.
Thank you, and good morning, Kingsley.
Also welcoming to the second topic, Associate Professor of Political Science, Nasarawa State University, Dr. Jidofo Adibe. Dr. Adibe, pleasure to have you on the program. And the new guest who's joining us is Mr. Richard Ali. Ali, of course, is a lawyer and program manager of the Association of Nigerian Authors Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism Program. Ali, a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, let's begin, by getting the views first of Ali. How worrisome is the incidence of hate speech in Nigeria today?
Hate speech is extremely worrisome. You must consider it to be like that single matchstick that can set the entire forest on fire. Because the point of hate speech is to work psychologically on the mindsets of people who have nothing, who seemingly have nothing to do with the person who instigates this. I write an article, put it on my blog, somebody on the other end of the country says, oh my God, this agrees with what I think I should do, and he goes out and starts killing people. But because I was originally irresponsible, and there are other structural issues. Nigeria is a nation state, and we always have the classic issues of all nation states, integrative forces, disintegrative forces. We can't do anything about this. But the whole point with nation building is to try and create a balance between disintegrative forces and the disintegrative forces. Hate speech is one of the most potent ways to ensure that the disintegrative forces are able to leverage their message to lead to worse social chaos.
But mainly, the people behind some for those who write, that is for those who could write actually, and for those who cannot. What is entirely really is their motive in most times?
Yeah, the thing is, we need to understand hate speech as being a symptom. It really is a symptom. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's a social symptom of other problems that exist in the country and in the polity itself. You have the freedom of speech, yes. But if you have not been properly educated in a proper pedagogical system, in a system of socialization, which the Ministry of Education and the federal government is responsible for, then that right or that freedom, that fundamental human right for freedom of expression can easily be turned into expressions that go to the very opposite of the human rights themselves. And that is the situation which we have. So these people who engage in hate speech wherever they are found, these are people who, there are people who have a problem, a health problem, a mental problem, but in this case it is a social problem, and they are barometers to what we have failed to do with our education over the last 30, 40, 50 years.
Well, thanks. Well, we'll come back to you, Richard Ali. Professor Umar Pate, persons argue quite clearly that what we are seeing is freedom of expression as enshrined in Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution, which guarantees freedom of the press as well as the right of others, to freely express their views. But there's a counterpoint that hate speech is corrosive, essentially, of that very section itself. What are your thoughts?
Yes. Freedom of expression is there, but you must also know that freedom of expression stops, yours stops where some other persons begin. And that there are also laws on defamation, on libel, and also on public peace, good behavior, and safety of the rest of the public. Simply because you want to express your opinion, that is as dangerous to the rest of the society as perhaps putting the entire nation on fire. It does not mean that you should be given that right, because your life alone could not endanger or be better than the lives of 190 million Nigerians. And so we need to understand what it means. What is our own definition of freedom of expression? Even in the US, where perhaps this thing has its own foundation, they still talk about hate speech. I don't know if you have been following what the president of the US said 2-3 days ago on the KKK and the controversial child, whatever that happened there. So
there was a counter rally in Boston on the weekend as well.
Well, there will always be. So long as there are people, there will always be opinions. Right. But then what is the general consensus and what is it that is at the base, which is fundamental to the... We have seen what has happened in Rwanda. We have seen what has happened in some other nations. Now, the point is, like Gimba said, we need to address certain fundamentals, particularly in the education sector. If you, perhaps in the course of our discussion, we are going to talk about actors and generators of this public speech. And you know that the educational system is one, religious platforms, and politicians, and political party structures, and other sectors. And what do you mean by education, like he said? Today, many of us, or like some people say, our universities, our school system are completely localized. Kingsley, today is possible for you to be in Abuja. Your child will be born in Abuja, and he will go through all his educational life in Abuja here. One, if he is poor, he will go to the poorly equipped local government education schools where he will meet with other poor children like him, and they will continue to exchange poverty and whatever it is and grow up like that. Attend universities where they will also go and have this kind of interaction. The elites who stay in Abuja here will take their children to the best of schools, best of facilities. They will just be interacting among themselves. Go to private universities, interact among themselves, and come back to continue ruling the rest of Nigerians. Then, on the religious side, you take your own child to your own church, he will watch your own church TV, and then interact with people of his own type, go to his own church university. At the end of the day, he knows only his own people and his own types. The same thing on the other side. So by the time they grow up, now they have ideas, they can think. They only think based on their own worldviews. And if you go to our universities today, you don't even see international scholars coming in like it used to be. You go to the department, all the lecturers are from the same place.
Almost the same local government.
The same local government. So they'll just be reiterating the same ideas
Even the so-called federal character of allowing admissions to vary, we no longer respect that.
Almost incestuous.
All right, Dr. Adibi, let's share your own view. And one of your recent article, you started with the question of, am I alone in this political, in noticing how Nigerians seems to enjoy profiling and also pouring invectives on one another. Now, we've just said the mindset of an educated person, but it will appear that it's not just in those localities where we thought the people who are not schooled enough, who are not literate enough, are just the one who have the benefit of just pouring invective like that. What is this latest class of elites or educated persons doing?
Okay, first of all, let me say that what we call hate speech is an omnibus term, is a generic term that embodies several forms of speech acts, most of them protected speech. For example, when people talk about hate speech, they often confuse it with offensive speech, which is protected speech. Even in what, again, we call hate speech is a protected speech under the First Amendment in American jurisdiction, which means you cannot be, it's not criminalized. That raises the question of what is hate speech.
So what is hate speech?
It is exactly as I heard him saying, any speech, it's not just speech, display, portraiture that tries to to profile you on the basis of your group membership. Yes. Some other people say, look, you must add the point of anyone that will, that will kind of make people dispose them to a kind of prejudicial action or violence. And people, even in there's a big debate, say even if you adopt the definition that it must dispose people to violence or incitement, that even the opinion you hold could be misconstrued as incitement. Why is it very necessary in some mature democracies to make categories of speeches, to differentiate different forms of speech? Because of their belief in free speech. In fact, the First Amendment in American Constitution listed 5 areas of freedom that must not be tampered with, one of which is speech. And the arguments are basic. One, they believe that it's only through unfettered competition of ideas in a political marketplace that the truth will be discovered. And they also believe that, for example, they distrust the government so much that unless people are free to say whatever they like, the government can take advantage of it. And that is what some of us are afraid of. When people are not talking now, we are going to deal with hate speech. Now in the US, they started a project which they call Dangerous Speech Project, where they try to make a taxonomy, a list of speeches that can qualify to be called hate speech, as opposed to offensive speech. In the article you cited, for example, I was giving an example with in 2015 when Ayofa Ayoshe was, took an advert of some northern leaders saying that to imply that Buhari was too old and might die in office, like I mentioned Moritala Mohammed, Yaradua, Abacha. I said it was offensive. But to the extent that it did not call people to violence, it was not a hate speech. So the first thing for us to do is to start by developing a taxonomy, as they are doing in the US now, of what really constitutes hate speech.
Okay.
Otherwise, we run into a situation where the government and other institutions would then utilize it, remember Decree number 4, utilize it to begin to tamper on free speech.
Okay. All right. You see, there are all categories of offensive speeches. Then you have hate speech, you have dangerous speech. Now, I agree totally about the issue of free speech, but then the context matters a lot.
So how can people use
what is our own understanding of the context, where you have a highly multicultural setting, very diverse, but highly illiterate society also, where sensitivities like religion still counts. You remember what happened during the this day blasphemy demonstrations in Nigeria. In US, it wouldn't have caused anything. But in Nigeria, look at the reaction it attracted.
Yeah, 2007.
So you see, you have to be sensitive to the context. While you are free to open your mouth and say whatever you feel like, but then what is your own understanding of the feelings of the others?
I think also in that Dangerous Speech Project led by Professor Benesh, they actually answer some of these questions. For example, they say the context is important, who made the speech is important, the audience is important, the likelihood that the audience will understand it as a call to violence.
Exactly.
Is also important. So I think the first and fundamental thing for us is to start by disaggregating this thing we call hate speech, to recognize that it's an omnibus term, and start to, in a narrower form. In fact, in the U.S. Constitution, under the First Amendment, the only form of speech act that they explicitly ruled out from protection is what they call fighting words, which are the words that are capable of inciting people to violence. But even then, American courts find it difficult even to condemn them because of the broad boundary between the fighting words and offensive speech, which they explicitly protect, because they said it contributes to the vibrancy of the matter.
I was just wondering, let's take this down now to our environment, because there are jurisdictional differences. Now, the First Amendment jurisprudence is not the same amendment, it's not the same issue that we have in Nigeria on account of some of the issues already articulated by Professor Patti. What governs us is Section 39 of the Constitution, that's of the 1999 Constitution, as amended together with other issues. As you're very well aware, the First Amendment in the U.S. has been taken as a basis to grant pornography, for instance, to ensure that whatever is going on in the U.S., continues to happen. But that's one point. What you have said with regard to creating a proper taxonomy, a proper definition, because we'll come to that, so that you do not now criminalize, what is regarded as criticism. Otherwise, you mentioned Decree 4 earlier, but I'm not sure we are running back to Decree 4. But Richard Ali, can we properly delineate offensive speech from hate speech? What would be, in your opinion, the critical ingredients in a speech that will make it, that will qualify it as hate speech, rather than being merely offensive?
Yeah, the critical ingredients would be stereotypes, the deliberate creation of stereotypes. Because for the simple reason that it denies every person that belongs to that group that you have created their individuality. When you decide to create a really large group and then you call it them, all right? It could be somebody who helped you with water at one point in time. It could be somebody who saved your life because he was a doctor and he didn't look at you as being Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, 100 other ethnic or religious possibilities. But you create them as a them, and then you point at them. They did this, they did that. They are the center of everything. They are the reason why it rained on my parade. They are the reason why the fire burnt my food. And you create these groups. So once you have created that group of people, anything more than 3 people, 100 million people, 40 million people, and you refuse them the sophistication of their individuality, of their ability to express themselves, to contribute meaningfully as distinct human beings. Once you have done that, you have crossed the line from what is merely offensive, which is essentially, it could be here and there, it could be neither here nor there. You have crossed into the line of hate speech, because you put all of them in danger of whatever you're advising.
Ali, thanks. I just, Professor Patti, before we come to Dr. Adibe, can we draw an analogy here? You talked about defamation earlier, which is like libel. As you very well know, in the law of libel, vulgar abuse is not necessarily libelous. Vulgar abuse, insult, insult the person. But when you're done making an assertion of facts, then you have a ground for libel or defamation. Can we also make a distinction in this case between hate speech and offensive speech? Or where do we have a transmutation of offensive speech into the hate region?
Well, if offensive speech is the general term, then you have hate, you have dangerous. Hate speech comes up when you utter words that demean, ostracize, demonize, say something ill, abuses, incites against an individual based on his own group membership. And this group could be political, it could be ethnic, it could be religious, it could be whatever. You now, instead of picking him as an individual, you now generalize it. Now, and why do you do so? One, to express your own hatred towards him. Secondly, to make him hate himself. Thirdly, to make others hate him. Now, the third dimension, which is the dangerous speech, comes in the third aspect, where you now provoked hatred from others towards that particular group or individual based on
the indices of their membership of either ethnic group, religious group, or whatever. Now, in our own context here, it's very easy because we are a multicultural nation, highly diverse, with all sorts of characterizations. And the stereotypes also are many. Right now, I can count as many stereotypes as possible. In every language in Nigeria, you could bring out words that they use to describe other people. Words like Arna, for example, in Hausa. Or if you go to my own language, we say Kado. You go to the Royal, say Malam, Aboki. Or you go to the Igbos, they also have their own terms where they look at others who are outsiders. And based on that characterization, they now say so many things that will make others to also demean, demonize, or ostracize you.
Well, Professor, these are some of the these areas that you've called, North, South, East, and West. These are some of the things as ethnic group that is in our diversity that have made us strong, which is the envy for most other nations of the world. So why are such areas of diversity still now being used to actually fight one another?
You see, Nigeria, there are some realities about Nigeria. That Nigeria is a multicultural nation is real. Is diverse, is real. Is heterogeneous, is real. These realities, if we make good use of them, they become assets for us. But then, if we poorly manage them, ethnicize them, religionize them, regionalize them, and decide to deny certain facts, then we go into the kind of troubles we are going. And when we also fail in our own social integrative capacities, it also leads to this kind of things.
So this is a clear failure of social integration.
Of course. You have certain platforms that are supposed to unite us. If you take the civil service, for example, you take the military, you take educational institutions. These are areas where every Nigerian is supposed to have a share. But when you have appointments being sloppy, when you have the civil service, certain people cornering certain units, when you have our educational institutions increasingly being localized, then these are some of the fallouts. And then politicians now come in. Instead of becoming elites of unity, they become elites of disunity in their attempt to capture power and share resources.
Well let's, Dr. Adebe, before we come to you, can we, we said earlier, that's Mr. Richard Ali, that hate speech is worrisome now. Is it possible for us to indicate when we started getting the sense that hate speech is overrunning the polity?
I would put it with I would say that the core of hate speech started for me as a subset of the environmental militancy in the Niger Delta. For me, that's where it started. There was this general, the whole country is against us. We have a particular sense of disenchantment, which is different from every other person's own. And as a subset of this, you can understand it as environmentalism, you can understand it as criminality, but the moment that wholesale chopping of other people, oh, these are Hausas, these are this, they've always taken our oil and all of that, that's when it started. All right, but then I want to believe that when the Goodluck Jonathan administration came up, it went down because they felt a sense of ownership to it. But with the end of that, with the removal of the last PDP government, it flared up again with the Masab situation. And the Masab situation made it really, really worse because they were now tapping into a historical vein. There had been a 3-year civil war already. And it was, oh, there was a war, we were defeated. But we have cases that say different. I was born in Kano, I grew up in Kano. You've had instances where people left their houses in Kano because of the war. They came back, their neighbors gave them the rent from those houses. I have a personal story where the person sold, the rent was kept for him, given to him when he returned to Kano. Then the owner of the house, the able man, sold it to the Hausa man in order to raise money for his business, right? He went and traded, did his business, and 3 years later bought the same house back from the Hausa guy that he had sold it to. Do you understand it? But when Masab or when any of these groups, when they talk about, they will deny that such things happen because it goes against their narrative. There's a dangerous narrative of exclusive victimhood that says that the way we are treated is worse than any other one because we are us and because they are them. But this dehumanizes everybody by saying that, oh, your own issues don't matter because you don't count. instead of us to all come together and say, look, this same thing affects all of us, the government is rubbish, the civil service is ineffective, the social services are not being delivered. Instead of us to come together and add pressure to do that, we instead say, oh, the water didn't flow in my house because I am Igbo. But then you are just you are in your house. How is that? How does that affect you differently from the next person who does not have those services?
Dr. Adibe, your thoughts in terms of distinction between hate and offensive, that's one leg. And can we also now begin to take a look, for instance, at the likely causative factors? Is the shrinking political space or economic opportunities to blame for all the rise in hate speech?
Well, first of all, let me briefly say that respond to my friend Professor Pate that profiling everywhere in the world, people profile one another. There's, even if you go to the UK, we say, you know, it's, what you expect is a Welshman. What you expect is just Englishman. And in the black Americans, we say, white man can jump. So we also have to be prepared to accept that certain things, be able to laugh at ourselves sometimes, not to take some of these things serious. Because all Nigerians, all ethnic groups, we are all both victims and victimizers, as you rightly pointed out. Having said that, the issue of what possibly causes hate speech, or I would say the extent to which it has degenerated, I have pinned it elsewhere in some academic writings too, is one of the manifestations of the crisis in our nation building. It's also indicative of the fact that we have not done enough. We have not prioritized nation building, which is narrowly defined now as deliberate use of state instruments to wield people that are different together. Being heterogeneous is not a disadvantage to nation building. Just like being homogeneous does not necessarily mean that you will succeed as the case of Somalia illustrates. So we have then to return back to the table. The part of Boko Haram or Masob or what have you see a number of groups and individuals who are delinking from the Nigerian state and trying to find fulfillment in other contrivances which they believe will give them meaning to their life. And I think that's the hallmark of it. And unless we return back to trying to see how do we build a sense of community among ourselves. And let me reply to my brother here. It's not accurate. I've heard people say that when Jonathan lost the election, Masob came. It's not accurate and it's not very historical. If you look at, for example, in 2011 when Jonathan won, by the time he won, he became president, there were about 1,000 Masob members in detention, including Owazurike. He released them. And when he released them, he released, ordered their release. There seemed to be a mellow. But immediately they came with the group they call Nigeria, the Biafran Zionist movement of Onwu Kakalo. That was in 2014. He tried actually to seize a radio station in Enugu in order to proclaim Republic of Biafra. And then you also have the IPOP, which was either created in 2000, depending on which literature you read, either 2012 or 2013, because they felt that Owazurike had become compromised. So they started the agitation. The man that seized the radio station was jailed for 2.5 years. Owazurike himself had been continuously in jail 2.5 years, 2 years. In fact, in 2010, Ojukwu had to visit him in prison. So what we should be asking is that these people have been doing this thing all along. Under P2B in 2006, he ordered shoot at sight at Masob members. So it is not quite correct. And I think we need to correct it. That is because of Jonathan lost the election that suddenly you found a resurgence in that.
Well, this is some of the information that needs to be passed from time to time, so people will not get...
we should be asking why did it take this dimension?
Okay. All right, Mr. Lee, yes, you're part of a program preventing and countering the violent extremism program. What strategies are being employed?
Yes, the Association of Nigerian Authors Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism program. It's a 3-year program of the Association of Nigerian Authors, and what we want to do is to use literature and the arts to counter and to prevent violent extremism and at the same time counter it. So counter radicalization and strategic communications. The thing with terrorism, the thing with violent extremism, is that it is essentially a battle for the mind of people. when the terrorist releases his video, he wants to work on the mind of the person who is listening to that video, whether it's Shekau or any of the other versions of Shekau type people that we have. So a purely hard approach, which is sending the military in, is only one approach. There has to be a soft approach to this, and we believe that if we were to come to terrorism and violent extremism through a cultures-based approach, these people come from cultures that have norms, that have values, that have been over centuries. So if we were able to use literature as the medium to appeal to these norms and values that these people already have, then we would bring a completely new change to...
So more like using the art form that the people are used to and are known with.
Absolutely. Guerrilla theater, folk theater, drama, plays, painting, things like that. Because it speaks directly to them at the level of norms. And then the effect is just one simple effect, which is that as opposed to having officers of the government or NGOs being the contact points for CVE activities, the citizen himself becomes a contact point of CVE because he has been inoculated, to use the right word, with the counter idea, such that when he hears somebody say, go and burn, they are this and that, he already has the idea. He says, oh, no, I don't believe this because of this.
All right. Richard Ali, novelist and lawyer, as well as program manager of the Association of Nigerian Authors Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism Program. We'd like to thank you for being part of our discussion.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
All right. It's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we have another guest to join Professor Pate and Dr. Adibe.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Together, no matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together. Let's stop fighting each other. Let us live as one. It doesn't matter where you come from, your tribe or religion, man, woman or child. It doesn't matter who you are. Put Nigeria first. No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together.
How can we develop when we're always in crisis? Families have become refugees in their country. No matter our differences, show some understanding.
No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
All right, welcome back. It's Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. It's a live broadcast. We still have Professor Omar Pate, Dean, Faculty of Communication, Buhari University. Dr. Adibe is still with us here. Jidefo Adibe is of Nasarawa State University, Associate Professor of Political Science. We signed off Richard Ali a moment ago. We've been joined now by another guest who is Abdul Hakim Ajijola, familiar face also on Good Morning Nigeria. We haven't seen him for a while. He's a commissioner, a Global Commission for the Stability of Cyberspace. Mr. Ajijola, pleasure to have you join us.
It's an honor to be here.
All right, so let's kick off with you in this resumption of the discussion. The cyberspace has been identified, or some people would say, has been identified as one of the most available platforms for purveyors of hate speech. And when we have seen them, the anonymity that it provides, and so on and so forth. Exactly what do you see in terms of the magnitude of the problem of hate speech pervade via cyberspace? Of course, this will include social media.
Well, frankly, I think it's becoming a little bit overwhelming. And the critical issue that many of us working with cyberspace issues are concerned about is actually the weaponization of hate speech and fake news, because they seem to go hand in hand. Now, why is this important? I think we should ask ourselves this. First of all, it undermines the individual, the viewers. It undermines their right to know the truth in a timely manner. It also undermines institutions. And there are many people, we're using Nigeria as an example, that perpetrate these hate speech. They undermine the institutions and they forget that they will need these institutions subsequently, because it is these institutions that keep at least a semblance of law and order, a semblance of civilization. And I think very importantly, a lot of us forget in the heat of the moment that it undermines even our religious values, when we weaponize hate speech. And so whether we are maligning the political class, whether we are maligning another tribe, another religion. And I think it was very instructive this morning from the president's speech. You have to remember that the president has been a victim of the weaponization of hate speech and fake news, not only as an individual, but his family, arguably his town, his tribe, his religion, his country, even his race. So to that extent, even the #1 citizen, I think, has been a victim, like all of us. But it was very instructive that in his speech, he actually raised himself above this. And I think this is very important for us to learn that at the end of the day, there are actually bigger issues. And more importantly, I think at the end of the day, we have to understand that we're in an era of never forgetting. You may do some things as a 25-year-old, as a 35-year-old, as a 45-year-old. But maybe by the time you're 55, you have a change of heart, those things will come up and bite you. So I think it's very important that if you permit me, I'd like to quote Imam Shafi, who basically says, we need to wipe out the disease, not the patient. And I think in dealing with this thing, we have to look at it. So in moving the conversation forward, I would say to solutions, we have to look at from what I'd call the strategic level and also the tactical level. For example, at the strategic level, we really need to look at critical thinking. And this comes back to not just the educational system, but our broad awareness of how we do things. But more importantly, and I put the onus partly back on you, the media, but also the media managers and the political class. You see, the conversations have moved away, with all due respect, from the traditional media to the online media. So I think it's very important for the political class, the elites, to understand that they have to be able to monitor these things, and they have to be able to gauge temperatures, whether it's political temperature or whatever. Because at the end of the day, if you sit in your village and spew some hate speech, you can affect the stock market. You can affect investor confidence. So these are the things that I think are very critical for us to think about. I am glad to say that there is a need for the development of some norms. At the Commission in The Hague, we are trying to do so. But bringing it down locally, I'm very happy to note that even the NCC has been trying to develop some norms for online interaction. And we'll get into the tactical issues.
Of course, that brings us to the next question. This is a vast digital divide. Yes. Most people tend to now, even the smallest of devices now, I can sit somewhere comfortably and throw whatever it is I believe is going to affect somebody, or I don't even know it's going to affect somebody. Now, how do we begin to regulate such content coming on, whether you're online or offline? Actually getting the right content across.
Frankly, I'm very hesitant about the word regulation. And the challenge, as our eminent speakers have already said, where do you draw these lines? because even the fundamental definitions of untoward speech, hate speech, speech that facilitates crisis, it's very difficult to define. But again, I would like to put the onus back on what I'd call the formal media practitioners. For example, and with all due respect to Mr. Femi Adesina, there was a WhatsApp text circulating that Mr. President was coming back. Excellent, wonderful. But there was no source link to the State House website. So you actually had no means of authenticating or its veracity. So I think I would put the onus back on some of us that when you post some of these things, at least indicate, not just in written form, Femi Adesina, but actually the source where somebody else can go back and cross-check. So that when you have these credible sources, be it the State House website, be it NTA news site, these sites also have to be kept very much up to date. Because at the end of the day, I may post something, for example, on WhatsApp. Somebody reading it, because they know me, trusts implicitly what I say.
All right, Mr. Ajijola, thank you very much. Professor Pate and gentlemen, Ajijola made a point, Abdul Hakim Ajijola made a point that, look, traditional media is losing the platform for conversation to online media. But what we also find in terms of media convergence is you also find traditional media who themselves are available online. What do we need to do? Some of the aspects as is referred to have to do with gatekeeping failure. Because even in the traditional media, where, for instance, I mean, if you had a letter, a page or a section letter to the editor, the letter had to be vetted, an opinion had to be vetted. But now you have a disclaimer that is issued to say the opinions expressed here generally do not necessarily belong to us. And you find all kinds of irresponsible comments, persons, calling themselves living in a zoo or whatever they think that they are. So what can be done with regard to upping the game for online gatekeepers, as you find in the traditional media?
Of course, I will also join them in being hesitant about the issue of regulation. But then, the issue of credibility now comes up. Number one, with technology, there is a limit to what you can control. And the internet is a platform that has democratized access and also ability to disseminate information. We have to accept that reality. So the only way is for the conventional media also to be challenged to be highly credible and also be on the highway of these internet technologies, so that in the event that I receive any information, I could easily cross-check. And then you also, in your own ways, become highly credible in terms of being truthful, being competent, being relevant, being dynamic. And here, again, the issue of commercialization comes up. Commercialization blocks a lot of people from having the access into the normal conventional media. So what do? They now resort to the social media. And because of the weaknesses in media literacy among the population, the people believe everything because they have high distrust of the government. The behavior of the Nigerian elite over time has made a typical Nigerian to become highly distrustful. Religionizing of politics, the failure of state institutions, corruption, and lies that you see every day coming out from sources that shouldn't lie. Because of all of that, people become highly skeptical, because people become highly not so sure of the conventional media. Now, this is a challenge for institutions like the NTA, FRCN, and others, so that people do not have this perception that because they are owned by government, they are not likely to say what is truthful. It may not necessarily be so, which means we have to invest in these institutions for them also to be online and also be technologically able like any other institutions. But we cannot sit and continue lamenting and looking for ways of regulation. The age of control, the age of dictatorship in the cyberspace is gone. So how do we now equip ourselves? Like in my university now, we have introduced a Department of Information and Media where we'll be training people specifically on digital communication. This is to prepare our young journalists so that they go out and also know what to do. And like I've said, our elites must also learn to behave. When you hear leaders, national leaders, pretending to become sectional, opening their mouth to say things that are religiously dangerous, that are ethnically unacceptable, then who are you going to trust?
Dr. Adibe. what do we need to do in terms of strategic approach with regard to gatekeeping, conventional online?
Yeah, I agree with you. The discussion about controlling the internet has been going on in different countries, not just in Nigeria. In China, for example, you don't have Facebook, WhatsApp, they limit it. I agree with you. It will be dangerous for us to go down that route. And the internet has helped to democratize access to the media. However, I do believe that the umbrella bodies, like the Guild of Editors and all that, they should do more. They are the ones that should set a code of conduct of responsible journalism and be able to mete out some kind of punishment. For example, media owners, you're right when you talked about the convergence between the old media and the new media. But as they converge, most of this hate speech takes place in the comment sections. That's right. Is it not possible, for example, for them, before, in the early days, you have an administrator who reads through this and then decides which ones to post. Now, in many of them, the comments, as you make comments, they come out instantaneously. So there's that kind of a need to return back to the basic and say, before you post your comment, you can post whatever, but there's somebody who reads through and know which one that can
I don't know if you're aware of the NBC's move to come up with what you call like a saver or something like that, where phone-in calls will now be sieved before they are put on air.
Yes, that's right.
I'm just also trying to round up about the issue of this gateway keeping. For example, I heard about a speech made by Nnamdi Kanu at the Nigerian Union of Journalists in Enugu. The institution where such speech, for example, in jurisdictions in many countries, they can allow KKK and British National Party because they say if you ban them, it will be more dangerous. You drive them underground and glamorize the views they express. The only way they deal with them is to draw the ideas they express in the political marketplace and marginalize them, put them. Now, if credible institutions like a venue in Enugu, for example, allow purveyors of certain speeches to take place in their venue, those people should answer. In the same way, when, for example, a group of Arewa youths used Arewa, highly credible Arewa House, to issue a threat, it's not just them making a threat. How did they get access to Arewa House? That Arewa House should also be asked questions.
All right, gentlemen, there are reactions already from our viewers. We'd like to read through them quickly, then we'll find a point of convergence on what to do moving forward. I'll start with that of Mike Anyako. It says the escalation of hate speeches in Nigeria was were from people who lost politically. We must support government to stop the trend for our national unity. And
Festus Akimboyewa has this tweet: every Nigerian has a responsibility to condemn hate speech. We must also educate our children about the destructive effect of hate speech.
From Sunny Michael Omakoji's this tweet: I joined the federal government in this crusade against hate speeches. However, those in government should stop patronizing gross nepotism and ethnicity.
Ibe Abuchi tweets: hate speech is a cankerworm that must be fought with vigor and devotion.
Professor Oko of Oboche says the president's speech said it all.
Festus Akimboyewa again, like as President Muhammadu Buhari denounced hate speech in his broadcast, we should make clear we don't share in the animosity that triggers hate speech in Nigeria.
For Hisense Ungu, it says hate speech is not free speech, but war speech. It's ill wind that blows no good, and so should be discouraged by all good citizens.
And then we have this from Shaneze Esang. He said the president's speech was crafted to instill confidence in us that the fragmented issues bordering on our unity will be tackled frontally.
Muhammad Jamiu Sadara says our unity is not negotiable. We'll just have to take this pill because we can't chase many birds at a time. They laid a lot in United Niger.
All right, there's a tweet there from Ali Konsan. Thanks a lot to your president, NTA. Good morning, Nigeria, for the level of professionalism that we have. Thanks a lot for your comment. Let's take Sam Orakbe now. Sam Orakbe says, until the anti-hate speech bill is passed, we cannot correctly define hate speech. Do you agree?
Emmanuel Mazin says, governors killed national development by hijacking local government areas' contribution.
And then we have this from Lawal Wisdom. Lawal Wisdom tweets, I always remember President Buhari's quotation, this generation and indeed future generations have no other country than Nigeria.
Okay. From Festus Akimboye is another tweet, there must be no support for hate speech speech offenders and their violent prejudices in Nigeria. Those using internet for hate speech must be fished out. If we are to address this menace, we must at least reprimand those prominent politicians that initiate and support hate speeches.
Olusegun Dosunmu tweets, hate speech has never appeared in our lexicon. We just feel we want to air our grievances, and that's why we need this sensitization now. What do you mean?
Well, another commendation from Khadija Bello says the way and manner you discuss national issues is quite commendable. Keep it up. Thank you.
Abdullahi Musa tweets, my understanding of the statement, Nigeria's unity is not negotiable, is that Nigeria must remain one, either we restructure or not. Of course, that's harking back to the first topic we discussed earlier.
From Lawa Wisdom is another tweet. Unity in Nigeria is a must if we want to be free from economic predicament and also to build a nation for us and the future generation.
And Prosperity Wonders says the president should note that marginalization is another form of hate speech. The answer is no, it is not.
Omogbola or Babs?
It couldn't possibly be. I mean, let's be clear about that.
Yeah, sure.
Marginalization.
Right.
It's not hate speech. Yeah.
Omogbola or Babs CFR says Nigeria has over 300 ethnic groups. America has only the whites and the blacks with homogeneous language. Comparing US to us is misplaced.
All right, then we have this from Ataye Unisa. It says, better the government takes a decisive action concerning hate speech in all our corner, in all parts of the country, no matter who breaks the rules.
For Emmanuel George, says hate speech and disunity can stop if injustice, inequality, and marginalization stops in governance. We must stop deceiving ourselves.
Olusegun Dosunmu, I think the National Orientation Agency and NTA need to roll out media campaign against hate speech, but people should be able to express their minds. Well, gentlemen, we're pressed for time. It's been a very interesting conversation. One aspect, yes, you've mentioned the point, we shouldn't have regulation. I mean, we're all scared of regulation. Some scholars will say this is a carryover effect from our experience under the military. But why should we be afraid of regulation? If there is a drift towards the kind of invidious thing we find with regard to hate speech, which brings us to the point. There are pre-existing institutions and mechanisms. You have laws in the criminal code, you have provisions in the criminal code relating to disruption of public order. You know, what could then, what that could then mean. You also talked about NBC a moment ago, Professor Pate. Then you have the cyberspace, we have a cyberspace law with regard to all of this. Is it that we have not, in terms of law enforcement, been able to tap into these numerous provisions as well as agencies to ensure that we're reading hate speech before it gets out of hand? Dijola, first with you, and then later we'll take the professor.
Very quickly, you are right, we've not tapped into the capacities of these agencies. However, one of the reasons for hesitancy in terms of regulation is that, at least from a cyberspace perspective, it's very difficult at times to attribute. Somebody could log into Facebook with a fake name, fake address, fake credentials. How do you get them? Also, if somebody actually lives in Ghana or Ireland, says something about something in Nigeria, how do you enforce? So you see, some of these things make regulation actually very difficult. But in terms of moving forward, I would like us very quickly to touch on three things. In order to deal with this, first of all, we have to be able to identify the sources. In many cases, we can. And once we identify and have that attribution, difficult as it may be, when you shine the light of truth, you embarrass those sources, which comes to the second thing. You need to, in some cases, to be able to discredit the sources. There are some sources, for example, that once you just call them and discuss with them that, look, you misunderstand whatever it is, they themselves will correct themselves. But also, I think as a society, we need to learn how to drown the sources of fake news, the sources of hate speech, with the positive narrative. We must out-recruit them. And then very quickly, back to cyberspace issues. I'm very worried, very concerned that we are focusing, for example, on people trying to hack the election system. But actually, with fake news and hate speech, we are actually hacking the electorate. So the issue now becomes, we're actually undermining the liberal democratic system that we are trying to build.
Professor,
so this is why we must deal with it.
Engaging with ICT and the media, addressing this.
The media particularly, if you sit down sometimes we do content analysis of what some of our newspapers also carry. They carry a lot of hate and dangerous speeches also, but we are not talking on that. It is an area we need to address. For me, we need to look at the educational institutions and see how we can really come up with real multicultural educational system. We have them in the laws, but we are not practicing. And the behavior of our elites, politicians who go into offices and religionize everything, people who ethnicize, people who go and profile some ethnic groups, and then we have to address them also and embarrass them, as he said. Then not only that, our media organizations must be equipped so that they can also be real platforms of technology, not just enough to be talking and sermonizing. These are issues that we need to address so that the younger minds will also be influenced towards positive directions. We no longer know the history of Nigeria. We no longer know so many things about Nigeria.
Dr. Adibu.
First of all, I think just a brief comment on the regulation. And on Facebook and some other social media platforms, it is actually possible. They have this self-regulation mechanism where you can actually report somebody and they'll have their account blocked. That's actually one of the things we'll be looking, because it is actually questionable whether the law succeeds. If you take example, countries like UK, South Africa, you know about Julius Malema, who promoted the song Kill the Boer. He was convicted. You know, in France in 2002, Le Pen. But these are societies where the basis of nationhood is no longer contested. In a country like ours, and that's the limit of the law, if, for example, there are individuals who are known to have very strong views, let's say, for example, what will happen if Professor Mwabweze, Ango Abdullahi, Junaid Mohammed, Edwin Clark, people that are known to have very strong views that others from the other side may not agree with, if you go and convict them of hate speech, what do you think will be the consequence? And it will exacerbate the situation. And that happened actually in the state of Victoria in Australia once, where they used the law to criminalize hate speech. And what happened? They banned the use of religious profiling. All you have in the courts were Muslims and Christians bringing several lawsuits against each other, which ended up exacerbating the situation.
Dr. Adibe, thank you very much. The point really, gentlemen, I thought we also touched on that. What you just said now, we have to be careful. I mean, the system has to be careful not to criminalize dissent. And the fact that the statement is offensive doesn't necessarily categorize it, to qualify it to be hate speech. But that's the much that we can take, gentlemen. Professor Umaru Pate, appreciation to you for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you very much.
You came all the way from Bayo University in Kano. Also, Associate Professor of Post Science, Nasarawa State University, nearby here in Kefi. Thanks a lot for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you.
Abdul Hakim Ajijola, Commissioner, Global Commission for the Stability of Cyberspace. Thanks a lot for your insights as well. All right, so that does it for our second discussion segment on Good Morning Nigeria. Let's go over now to Arts and Entertainment to take one of our complementary segments.
Nigeria, Nigeria,
Abdullahi Hussein, a music prodigy of Haruna Oje, a popular waka musician in the 90s, prides himself of bringing smile to people's faces through his music. With his rendition of hit songs like Davido's Kileu and P-Square's Personally, Abdullahi says music can be expressed anywhere to thrill enthusiasts.
Swagger, swagger. I beat the bum, but the bum, 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 bum. Skaleu, 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 skaleu. Ever. Sagam, 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 sagam. Skaleu, skaleu, galeu, 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 galeu. What's up?
His audience are pretty much different, as he staged an all-time performance in recreation parks, event centers, and registries, endearing many to his sound.
Now me control everything. If you want high, they go high. If you want to come down, they go come down. Cool one on day, hot one on day.
Abdullahi believes music is a gift from God, hence the need to be used to galvanize a positive change in the society.
Personally, I gradually
Personally, these are things that should actually unite us, if you agree. Now, let's check out the weather prospects for the rest of today.
Thank you for joining us on the weather segment. There has been respite in weather activities in the past few days, a lot of which was due to